Hey. So welcome, a special welcome to Emma and Andrew here in the chamber, and Jane on Zoom, and I think there might be a couple of others to join us, but I'll ask Dwayne to do the opening karakia before we move on, please.
Kia tau mai te maramatanga, kia tau mai te rangamarie, kia tau mai te kaha, te aroha mō tēnei kaupapa, hui e tai ki e. Let's be grounded in clarity, let's be peaceful, let's be strong and loving at this issue, bind together, and so it is.
So thank you, Dwayne, for that. So we'll move to the housekeeping, and so there's a little while that some of you have been here. The toilets are out and to the left. The alarm goes, the fire evacuation assembly area is out by the, what was the ultimate firm, what's it called now, Ambrosia. Yeah, in the car park between the two and the TDC website. And if it's an earthquake, do the duck dive under the desk. So thank you for that. Apologies, we do have one from Fiona Wilson. Is there any others? Appears not. Someone happy to move those apologies be accepted. Move Councillor Dowler, seconded Councillor Butler. All those in favour will say aye. Against, resolution is carried. Thank you. Public forum, appears to be no one online. Right, no one's registered. Right. Welcome, Yako. We've just started the meeting. And welcome, Jane.
Good morning, team. Thank you.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Anyone have any? Appears not. Public forum, we've already done that. Confirmation minutes. Tasman Regional Transport Committee meeting held on Monday, 18th of October 2021, be confirmed as a true and correct record. And for councillors, they are attached on your iPad at the end. Is someone happy to move those minutes? Move Councillor Turley, seconded Councillor Dowler. All those in favour will say aye. Aye. Against, the resolution is carried. And then I think we can move to your report, Emma.
Thank you very much. Good to get down to the sunshine. Oh, of course, yes. Now, before I get into my presentation, I have a presentation of slightly different type, which is an award.
Oh, right.
Now, this has actually been lurking on my desk for a little while because of COVID. Oh. Ever closer, hopefully that'll work. Tasman District Council was one of 10 councils to win an Agent of Change award last year for the Golden Bay High School school zone trial. And this is recognising the tactical urbanism, the approach of taking an innovative and relatively quick and low-cost approach to trialling new ways of creating safe spaces in our communities for people to walk and cycle, and particularly with a focus around kids getting to school safely as well. Here's an award for Tasman District Council, so congratulations.
Thank you. Would you like to accept the award, Councillor Butler?
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I'd say that it was a slightly fraught process, but we got there in the end. So thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I think with what we've learned so much, and I think that's one of the things here is that making change happen when people are skeptical or nervous about it can be really hard and really challenging. And sometimes we do need to try things and learn. And I know from across the whole Innovating Streets activities, some of the things that have trialled didn't work. Others worked a lot better than people anticipated, and what had been initially quite strong opposition just subsided once people saw things in action. So it is a great way for us to learn, and it's fantastic that Tasman took that opportunity, and the community over in Golden Bay was up for learning. I know you'll keep looking at those opportunities. We've got some coming up in the update later on. Okay, on to the presentation. Here we go. So starting with some of the key national things that are happening around the country, the government recently reduced the emissions reduction plan, and we're still working through all of the implications and how this will actually integrate with decision making and activities in the transport sector. But some of the key things here is, for example, a 41% reduction in emissions from the transport sector by 2035. And sitting under that is how we reduce reliance on cars, particularly what we call VKT, vehicle kilometres travelled in urban areas, rapidly adopting low emission vehicles, and working to decarbonise heavy transport and freight. So there's more work to be done to really unpack that, but I think it's a really important thing for all of our partners to be thinking about this, because we're looking at both the embodied carbon, so the carbon in our construction processes, and in carbon emissions. And the targets are ambitious, and they will require quite significant changes. And they are different in the rural areas compared to urban areas. So there's quite a bit for us to work through and integrate into our decision making. Another thing that we're looking at across the country is the feedback that we've had about business cases and the need to review those and try and make them simpler and easier to navigate for people. So that submission process is closing this week, but we really encourage anyone to be feeding into that process and making sure that you're having your say, so that we can improve that process and ensure that everyone understands what each bit does and get good feedback as you go through the process. One of the other important changes came into force last month was the new land transport rule for the setting of speed limits. And this, as your teams are well aware, removes the requirement to set speed limits through bylaws and sets a target for reducing speed limits around all kura or schools by 2027. And with significant proportion to be done by 2024. And just on that one, many of the councils that we've been talking to are indicating they want to move faster than that. And so we're very happy to support what councils are trying to do, and also allows us to start really targeting how we use road safety cameras in the future. And as part of that, you may have heard we're trialling some new safety cameras in Auckland that enable us to identify people who are not wearing a seatbelt or using a mobile phone while driving. And that's to build an evidence base that will then allow us to change the law and be able to use those sorts of safety cameras. So the new setting of speed limits rule will require work up front to assess the entire network and identify what the safe and appropriate speeds are and the time frame for moving towards those. But once that's done, it's then a faster and easier process to make those changes happen. It enables both within a region and between regions for us to be making sure that we've got consistent speeds. So when someone crosses an invisible border between councils, that the road suddenly doesn't change speed simply because it's a different road controlling authority, and also allows us to factor in what the safe and appropriate speed may be now, but also what it would be if we change some infrastructure or other factors around it. We now have new Māori bilingual traffic signs, He Tohu Huarahi Māori, and whenever existing kura or school signs are replaced, they'll be replaced with these new signs, or when there's new projects that are bringing in new signs. We've partnered with Te Matawai and local government to bring these in, and we are also going to be looking at a range of other traffic signs that can be made bilingual in future. And we've also got some new te reo only signs, for example, marae signs that can be used either as a general sign, just with the marae on it, or with the name of the marae as well. And they're similar to school signs or other signs that enable approaching vehicles to be alerted that there may be more pedestrians or more turning movements and so on from people accessing marae. He Tirohanga Whakamua is our new 30-year plan. As you know, our infrastructure is generally 50 to 100-year infrastructure. And so we are increasingly wanting to build in really longer term horizons for thinking about and planning for our land transport system. And so we are building the digital tool that shows where those interregional strategic networks are, the main urban areas and the future focus areas, and where we're looking at upgrades or changes to our state highway network. And we want to then be working with you as our partners to ensure that we're joined up and thinking together on what this real strategic challenges and opportunities are in each region, and how the land transport system will be able to support those over time. Heading into Tasman region, are there any questions? Yeah.
Does, just in relation to the school signs, and there's a program to lower the speed limit outside all schools, will they be incorporated in that process if that's happening? Because there's a time limit on when that's got to be done by, isn't there?
So it's where the signs are being changed is when we would then, instead of replacing the sign with the old sign, we'll replace it with a kura school sign.
Right.
And we'd expect councils to be doing the same. So the old school sign is no longer a standard sign effectively. So if as part of the change in speed limits, that means that the signs approaching a school are going to be changed, then the new signs would be used.
Because what's the limit? 40 now outside the school?
Well, in future it'll be 30.
30.
Yeah.
And there'll be variable speed signs as well, will there?
It depends on each corridor. So they can be, there's different treatments according to how you assess each of those school areas, and depending on how far away that you propose to have the lowest speed limit.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Turley.
Just on that, I'm a little bit concerned with the length of time that could take and the confusion it could create. I think it would be better to have all schools changed at one time, because the public, they're going to use the excuse or be confused that they're not sure what speed they should be doing.
Through the chair, I can Claire can probably address what we're going to be doing around school speed limits as part of her agenda item in the next report. In the process.
And then the other thing, Emma, thank you for the report so far. Just in relation to the business case, it's actually, I'm not sure how long we've had notification about, because Thursday's not that far away. Is there some intention in what you plan to do to improve the business case process? Because it does seem to take a long time, be a drawn out process, and I have had people allege that it is just a delaying tactic to have a business case and put it off. And we did see a little bit of that in the Richmond business case where it was extended, and your process seemed to take a lot longer than ours.
So there's a couple of different components. So we've certainly had feedback that the business case process needed improving. So we absolutely, that's the whole purpose of refreshing it, is to make improvements. And there's probably two key aspects. One is the inputs, as in what goes into a business case, how much information is appropriate for the size and complexity of the business case itself. So that's one aspect of it. And I think what we've certainly seen around the country in some situations, whether it's a interpretation or there's a range, I think there's probably a range of things at play, that the amount going into probably the smaller business cases was perhaps disproportionate to the scale of investment. And we certainly didn't want to see that happening. So the business case is a really important step in the process. Obviously, we need to make sure that any investment is appropriate and that we've got a good evidence base behind it that stacks up, and that when we look at things across the country that we're able to say that we've followed an appropriate process for that decision making. There's also the decision making associated with the business cases and the timeliness of that. And in some cases, for larger business cases, there are where they have to go to the board. They do have to go into that board pipeline. And I know in the case of Richmond, where if you miss one kind of cycle, then you get pushed out.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things. We just need to communicate really clearly about that. But certainly with the smaller, less complex business cases, we do want the ability to have those assessed and get an answer quickly, even if it's a no or a not yet. That we're really clear about how long that should take and that people get feedback within that time frame.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Are we, and Richard's here, are we looking to make a submission to that or not?
Yeah, Drew's just exited the room. Yeah, I believe Drew was providing a submission. At least he got sick last week, so he was away for a bit. But yeah, he was drafting a submission. Mainly it's on technical points. We had that experience with the Berryfield Bridge, where we ended up doing a business case that was 65 pages long to ask for $500,000 of funding. It was too much paperwork essentially to get a decision at the end of the day, which was either yes or no. So yeah, we'd support the intention to, particularly for the smaller business cases, to slim down the process.
Councillor Dowler, then we'll go to you, Yackle.
Yeah, well, I sort of had a slightly different concept on the Richmond business case, because being involved with the Motueka State Highway 60 business case for 10 years and then still get it kicked to touch, I found the Richmond one quite refreshing. And it got through. So that was a difference between the two there.
Yeah.
But my question was about the emissions reduction plan. For a few years, I've sort of semi-banged the door about getting the rail upgraded over in Marlborough to start taking a lot of the freight from here instead of being transported straight to Christchurch, i.e. the milk tankers that leave Takaka and go to Temuka each day, when they could possibly be done on a twist lock tanker system onto railway carriages over there. And in the last few weeks, I've just heard that the Motueka orchardists have actually started to do that due to the inadequacies at the Nelson port. They're taking the containers over and straight onto a carriage, straight to Port Littleton, and shipping out of there. So I sort of feel that it's probably a way forward to take a whole heap of trucks off the road. Like I think there's about 18 or 19 milk tankers drive up from Temuka each day during the milk season to Takaka and then all the way back again. And then they come back a second time. It's a 24-hour system. So, just simple things like that for emission reduction. Certainly, we ain't got rail here, but it's not that far away. And unfortunately, you've got a lumpy hill in the middle. That's the bit, but yeah.
Yeah, so we're one of those planks in the ERP talks about improving or reducing the emissions and freight. That is certainly one of the aspects of it. And I know that the the ports are looking at potential inland freight hubs along the rail corridor over at Spring Creek. So those things are being actively explored and investigated.
The biggest issue we've got here is we just start getting the ships to take the fruit away, and the fruit has to be in certain countries by certain times, otherwise they get no money for it. So they've started opting for this to Christchurch to get it out on the boats that are available.
The driver for the inland ports at Riverlands as well, from both Port Nelson and ports in Marlborough, I think.
Yeah. It's just the size of the ships.
Thanks. Yeah, cool. You must be on mute. We can't hear you.
Can I just try that again?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, thanks. Is mine. Yeah, bravo your comments on rail. I think there's significant opportunity costs inherent if we remain a road transport dependent region. My comments were in regards to the transport emissions reduction. The 41%, just as a very high level comment, sounds grossly insufficient. I'll personally be interested to learn a bit more about what's behind that number. My understanding is that across the board, we require around 8 to 10% reduction per annum across all industries. And the speed limit settings, I was interested in that there's speed limit reductions only spoken of in terms of safety impact with no climate safety aspect to them. And I think this, in a positive, in a constructive sense, misses the opportunity for very rapid emissions reduction in transport through speed reductions. And I'd just be interested in your commentary on to what extent that's being considered.
And I don't know that it's been factored in explicitly at this stage. So we're still working through exactly what levers will make what contribution as part of that. And so there's certainly speed and other factors such as congestion and other things have a contribution as well. So we just need to really look across the different things that we can do to make a contribution. And we're focusing, speed we are focusing on primarily through a safety lens. Having said that, if it's going to make a contribution to the other goals, we're very happy to see that happen.
Yeah, just to supplement my comment, I mean, my prior understanding is that from 100 k's down to 80, you're looking at potentially around 30% reduction in emissions by doing something like that. If to the extent that that's true, you've just bought yourself 3 years of required emissions reduction in a snap. So yeah, would love to see it built in. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, through the chair. Yeah, I think on the same, I mean, I have been thinking about that as well, particularly in relation to the rural areas, because we're quite limited in the rural areas as to how we can reduce our emissions. We're very dependent on vehicles, and slowing speeds down would be one thing that could actually reduce rural transport emissions.
Thank you. Eva, I think we can move on to the regional update then.
Okay, so some of the project updates. So firstly, State Highway 60 Motueka High Street safety improvements. So that has been completed. Now we have had some feedback about the roundabout and particularly how the crossings are operating. So we've been doing some safety assessments there and are looking at potentially making some changes to really make that work really effectively, it's one of those challenges of bringing in a new type of crossing design that if it doesn't quite deliver all of the benefits in the way we envisaged, we do need to be prepared to tweak that and make some changes. So we're just working through that, and once we've got a confirmed approach, we'll certainly let you know. But it's been great getting the feedback from the community, and we've done a bit of work with the schools, just making sure that the kids are really getting good practice at using pedestrian crossings, and making sure they're looking drivers in the eye and all those sorts of things before they step out. So we'll keep you posted on the changes that we do make to that intersection. In terms of the traffic signals, my understanding is they're all working well and as planned. So great to get that feedback as well. Richmond PBC, so that's been endorsed by the board, and then the next steps are really looking at where are those funding opportunities coming up and what are the things that will fit under low cost, low risk, and what are the things that will require a more significant process. And finally, the Waitapu Bridge in Takaka, we've got the draft landscape plan out for feedback. That's been really great to get that plan developed in partnership with Mana Whenua, and also recognising just how much the site is held in high regard by so many people in the community, and from farmers to the fishers to families who have been going there for many, many years, really wanting to make sure that the community continues to get great access, that we're also designing for lots of floodplain, and that people can still have access and enjoy it. So I think that's been a really constructive process. Obviously, the feedback on that is now closed, but we'll still look at what else we can do to bring the community in to be a part of the planning for the site. So the urban speed review in Motueka, so that's all been installed and in place. We have, so the contractor painted what's called sharrows, which are the shearing arrows, for showing that a section of road is intended to be shared by bikes and vehicles, so that vehicles expect to see the bikes in the lane. Now they've been painted slightly to the left, which could be read to imply that they should be on the left as opposed to owning the lane. So we are looking at potentially getting those repainted to be right in the middle of the lane, because they're really there to signal that it is a shared space, and that cyclists should feel really comfortable being in the lane, and vehicles at 30 k's should certainly be giving them the space to be in the lane as well. And then upcoming speed reviews, we have just been pausing slightly as we worked through all the technical side of bringing in the new speed management rule, and we'll then be able to determine where we're going to move in terms of speed reviews across each region. And I do note that Mike Creamer has joined us, who is an expert on the new speed management rule, and we've got the topic later in your update as well on speed management plans. So if there's any specific questions you've got about how we go about implementing that, Mike will be able to assist us on that. Emergency works, so I feel like there's just a constant range of emergency works around the region, my whole region from the Wellington side right through. So we've got some good pictures there of some of the earth movement that we're seeing around the region, and areas where those hillsides do move in ways that are sometimes somewhat surprising, like Birds Hill. I know people often find that quite intriguing to see the pavement moving the way it is there. And where we get, particularly where we get areas where we get these hillside movements, and it's relatively common around New Zealand, and we have some quite significant stretches where we can't sort of engineer our way through it. We have to work with those big areas of movement, and it's about how we maintain it and monitor it, and every now and again go in and take a bit of action to make sure that the road remains robust and resilient. So the crew's been out there working, doing a great job, and we just really encourage anyone driving through those sites to really take care, drop your speed to the posted speed limit, and particularly where those lanes are out, to proceed with care. Regional road closures. Now, recently we had our first scheduled Takaka Hill closure, so closing overnight for 5 nights. And this is just an indication of how efficient it is to work this way. And we're starting to do this across the country a lot more. We started with the Remataka Hill and State Highway 2 out of Wellington. And what we found is that by having a full closure of the road, it enables us, our crews can work really safely, particularly in these narrow, windy sections of State Highway, where you cannot get a good buffer zone around your workers. So it means that not only are they safe from through traffic, it means that they can actually work on multiple sites through the closure, and that what they find is they get a lot more work done because they're not having to stop, they're not having to work in tightly constrained sections of the work site. And so that's just a list of all the things that they were able to achieve in those 5-night closures. So we will look to continue to do this. I did ask what EMPs and CMPs were. Edge marker posts, culvert marker posts. There we go. So those are all the things. They're proactive. They help keep the road resilient from weather events. They keep it safe, and we're really thrilled with that. We do know that preparation is really key for these night closures, and so letting people know well in advance, letting people know how we manage it. We always are able to provide access for emergency vehicles, and in significant situations, we sometimes are able to escort vehicles through. But the more we can do this and help communities prepare and know that it's going to happen, the better we're able to keep those roads in great shape. And I think people then start to really see that there's a significant improvement. As an example, we had a major rain event in Wellington recently. The Remataka Hill Road was really resilient. Normally we'd get slips and rocks across the road. We did have some damage, but rather than having to close the road during the day, we were able to simply move into our night closure protocol, run the night closure, get everything tidied up and back to normal for the vast majority of traffic. So I think these are really good, safe ways of working and keeping our region moving really well. So we've also had the night closures on Whakatū Drive to make repairs to the Nayland Road overbridge. And then we're looking for next summer to have closures for Taka Hill, Whakatū Drive, the Whangamoas and Wild Pass. So all of those will enable us to get really high quality work done as quickly as we can with the least inconvenience to journeys. And I don't know that we've done an assessment of the number of day closures that allows us to avoid.
I could give you some more information on those closures now.
Yeah.
So just through the chair, thank you. So since we put the PowerPoint together, the team have done a bit more work on the road closures, so I can try and give you a bit more information, just with the intent of, early heads up is probably better than anything else. So on Takaka Hill, we're looking at Monday to Friday night closures over 3 weeks. So for a 3-week period. Now we're still not quite sure. We're going to try and avoid the main summer, but it's probably going to be, early in the season or later in the season, probably more likely earlier in the season, but it'll be over 5 nights over 3 weeks, so 15 nights altogether. And then what I think isn't up there is the Ruby Bay bypass. We're looking at 2 full-day closures for reseals on the Ruby Bay bypass. So that'll be, we'll need to talk to you about a diversion then through Mapua for that. But that doing a 2-day closure kind of is the alternative, is a kind of a 3-week partial closure, and you just don't get the same quality of work and a lot more disruption. And that's the same for Wakatu Drive, State Highway 6. We're looking at a 2-day closure of State Highway 6. Wakatu Drive, which would be, again, we'll probably go over a weekend for that. So that'll be diverting traffic through Stoke. But again, the alternative is a 3-week stop-go, which you just don't get the same quality of work, or, the disruption just goes on and on. So, and then there'll be some closures in the urban areas of Richmond and Nelson. They'll just be overnight closures when we're doing smaller reseal work. So we'll flag those early. Whangamoas is 3 or 4 nights in January, and Weld Pass is a similar thing to Takaka Hill. It's going to be 5 nights over 2 weeks, probably before Christmas as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Councillor Butler.
Thank you. I'll just a question about the time of closing, because I think in the past we've had 9 o'clock to 5 in the morning, and I think some of these later closures have been 8 o'clock, 8 p.m, and one of our staff members actually got caught. He had to go back and stay the night in Takaka. But there is a big difference between 8 and 9. So I just wondered whether it's because you've got a standard closure, or whether or not you are actually tailoring it to the amount of work that needs to be done.
So
preference is 9.
So yeah. It's a bit of both, and that's what happens now is we're starting to have conversations with industry, especially on Takaka Hill with Fonterra and Tallies as well, and Solly's as well, yeah. So, but also the local communities there, just to try and work out what is the best time. Obviously, shorter times does mean that the closures go on for a little bit longer, but we need to kind of work that balance. So that's what happens. That's what's happening now for the next few months, is working out what are the best times and the best dates that's going to have the least inconvenience. And then we want to make sure that once we've established that with the main stakeholders, that then we can start making sure, giving people plenty of notice of what's happening. So this is a really, really early heads up for you that this is where we're going with this. Yeah.
So just in relation to that again, just in relation to World Pass, if you're closing that overnight, would you expect heavy traffic to go through State Highway 63 and 6 and 65 as they did previously?
Yeah, well, they did that obviously through the alternative route with Kaikoura, but we did a closure on Well Pass last summer, and it was a 5-night closure. We worked very hard with the Interrail, with the ferry operators and all the truck operators, and a similar thing. We adjusted the times, and I think we did allow them through one time in the evening. So we managed to work with all the industry so that they could. They could accommodate going through without using the inland route, and that's what they did. And we actually got huge praise from the freight industry that we gave them advance notice, and we changed some of the times to make it work for them as well. So that same thing will be happening again.
That'd be great. Thank you. Thank you. Carry on.
Okay, so into our low cost, low risk. So we've got a number of things here. Obviously, rural school bus stop safety. I know there's been a number of concerns raised by people wanting to really make sure there's great safety for kids when they getting onto those rural school buses. Walking and cycling. So again, looking at shoulder widening, and also the State Highway 6 Whakatu Drive shared path. And that's obviously a key connector between the two districts. So we're looking at designs for that as well. And then the completed low cost, low risk projects, a range of those, shoulder widening, the Brightwater work to alleviate flooding, and the Richmond deviation medium barrier. And following up on a number of queries that we had last time, just to make sure that you've got that information to hand. Obviously the first one, we don't have anything in the NLTP for a roundabout there. And these are the sorts of things, obviously, we're going into the next RLTP planning process soon. So these are the sorts of things that you might want to be thinking about for that. Speed, as I mentioned, speed management programs under review. So we'll obviously want to look at how we align those. Taka Hill, yes, there are places where trucks will cross the centre line. And that's not unusual on a section of highway like that. And that's where obviously making sure that people are going at a suitable speed for the road is really important. And I know most of the truck drivers are pretty experienced, they know the road really well. But we still need everyone to be taken care. The improving cycle facilities, so proposals for both separated cycle lanes and shoulder widening. So we've got no plans on that section at this stage. And on the separated cycle lanes, as with a number of areas, we have what we call a tourism trail, and then there's also demand for more commuter style routes as well. And so we're not able to meet all of that demand, but these are the sorts of things that we should keep looking at where those funding. And so if you've got them identified as priority corridors, when the funding opportunities do come up, or where there's where we review our activity classes and we've got space in them for new projects to come in, that we can pick them up. Motueka High Street, there were concerns around trucks using the local network through the construction period. So I'm not sure if we've got any feedback yet on whether that's gone back to normal now that the work's largely completed. That is something that obviously we do want the trucks to keep on the state highway rather than running through the local streets. And I think, as I mentioned at the last meeting, there's no proposals for a bypass investigation for Motueka. Richmond PBC, the link road from Beach Road to the roundabout, that wasn't in the PBC, but that's the sort of thing that when we do get to the stage of triggering the Hope bypass investigation, you could include that as a part of the scope for investigation. And finally, the flooding sites. So that's really where we need to keep working with TDC on those sites, where when those roads were constructed, we didn't have stormwater sites, and so we need to work with what's available in existing water environment to actually see where flooding's coming from and make sure that we're managing it as best we can.
Thank you.
I think that's us.
Councillor Turley, Councillor Naylor.
Thank you for that. I just have a couple of comments with, firstly, State Highway 6 Ellis Street and River Terrace intersection. The Brightwater pub has just been resold and it's going to be demolished. So I'm not sure if there's some interest there to look at. They're going to build new accommodation and whether you would need a bit more land, because I really know that the Brightwater community want a roundabout there. That one of the local teachers has, every time I see her, she complains that in the wet weather it takes her 25 minutes to half an hour to get across from Ellis Street to River Terrace Road. She lives in Mount Heslington, and it's just the traffic is constant going through there, and she can't use the underpass when it's wet because it's not an underpass, it's a drainage culvert. So I'd just like to highlight those points, and I would like to see prioritisation given to the commuting network rather than the tourist trails, because I think there's far more cyclists who would use the commuting network, and the greenhouse gas emissions would be reduced as a result if they were riding bikes into Richmond along the Hope motorway.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about. So yeah, I'd really like to just highlight those. And the other thing is the Richmond PVC. Yeah, I understand that, and I do think it shouldn't be, could be considered, but it should be considered as part of the Hope bypass. So just highlight that as well.
Thank you, Councillor Dowler.
Yeah, thank you for saying that you're going to have a quick look at the situation at the roundabout regarding the pedestrian crossings. We've had our first serious near miss there a few weeks ago. It was a he say, she says report to me, but it was apparently a teenager with the earplugs in gawking at his cell phone just walked straight out in front of a car. There was a heavy truck cruising behind. They weren't speeding. Luckily, the car stopped, and the 4 metre long skid marks from the trailer unit, which was fully laden. They reckon if the truck had hit the car, it would have probably propelled it into the pedestrian. So it was a closey, but no one was hurt, so that was all right. And I don't think that guy will walk across you like that again. So that's fine. Regarding the heavy trucks down Park Street in Motueka, I put a report through to Andrew a while ago about it, and I don't think the companies are going to change their mind. They've got the right to turn right at Park Street now. It's certainly the business owners are quite happy they're not getting the number of heavy trucks through the main street now, which is not really good, but also the tactile surface at the roundabout is putting them off when they're going around. They're fully laden with shingle and bits and bobs. They said they feel it is damaging their tyres. So that's that part of it. And that's pretty much me, but yeah, no, well done on sort of cruising. And the one thing about the high street, I did put a letter through to Jamie McPherson recently, and Jamie said it's a bit of a process about the redundant bus stop outside the Celtic service station in the middle of town. I had a ratepayer ring me, and he lives at the north end of town. He come down, he was doing his trip to the Celtic's garage and the Super Liquor to get his beer, and he'd come through the traffic lights just as they went green. No, sorry, he went through just on amber, or just before amber. He said, no doubt he was going through on the amber, and he'd put his indicator on to turn right. And all the traffic come out of Tudor Street and come around, and he blocked the road because everybody had stopped on the other side of the road, and he couldn't turn in until the traffic lights turned green, and then someone made a gap and he was able to do it. But by that time, the traffic was backing up. So theory was he talked to me about it, and I went down and had a bit of a look. And yeah, if you took that bus lane out and shifted the white line over a couple of metres, you could actually put a turning bay in there, similar to what you got going into the warehouse, which would allow a couple of 3 cars if they were in that situation. Because apparently the traffic that was backed up was quite a bit. So yeah, just a thought. And I think Jamie was going to pass it on to Andrew for consideration.
Andrew, do you want to respond?
Yeah, I think we're just on through the chair. I think we're talking to Jamie about that matter with the bus stops, and just on the roundabout surfacing, that's getting looked at as well. So we've got that feedback from numerous sources. So they're reviewing that as part of the review of the safety of that roundabout as well. So all those things are getting
And just on the
reviewed at the
traffic
moment.
going down Hard Street, was it, Matt? Is there any opportunity that we could put some signage up to discourage the heavy traffic using that?
So, so I think we've been talking to Jamie at Tasman about that. I mean, there's lots of things that you could do on the local network that would disincentivise trucks to use that local network and then use the state highway. So we're talking that through with Jamie.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Butler, I think you were here next.
Thank you. Just a little, would be just good to have a bit of clarification about the shoulders between Parapara and Collingwood, because it says that page 16, investigation underway, construction subject to funding allocation, and then the next page says no plans for any additional shoulder widening at this stage. So just a clarification about that shoulder widening that the Cycleways Society have been requesting. Is that, I'm just not sure if that is actually in the pipeline or for consideration or not.
Andrew?
Yeah, sorry, through the chair.
Sorry.
Yeah, so in the earlier bit, the section there is about the shoulder widening that's been recently completed at the top of the Birdsville area. And then the inquiry on the last page was around further shoulder widening between Tarkika and Collingwood. And at this stage, there's no further allocation in the next year's programme that we can see. But again, that's nationally prioritised. So we're always just trying to get what we can to do that. Yeah.
So this sections of shoulder widening between Parapara and Collingwood, investigation underway, construction subject to funding allocation and chorus assistance. Is that actually not?
Oh no, that's still progressing. That's a smaller section. That's
Right. Okay,
Yeah,
that's really what I just want
that's
to
still
clarify.
progressing. Yeah, so that's still progressing. Yeah, so there's a number, isn't there? So that one's still progressing.
Right.
The Birds Hill one is completed,
Yeah.
but any further ones now are subject to. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks
Right.
very much.
Yakul,
Hello. I just had a couple of reflection commentaries. One was on what I might term disproportionate authority, and the other was on the cycleways. As to the first, the disproportionate authority, I was reflecting on. There were two mentions here. There was one of the trucks and the Motueka roundabout there, and the tyres. And I just thought, that's interesting. Their level of concern about damage to their tyres. It's interesting that is a commentary that makes it to the table when we don't hear so much about the gross damage which trucking is doing, in many cases unpaid, to our local roading systems. And similarly with the cars turning in, look, I absolutely, at a personal level, I understand the frustration with blockage at intersections. But I think it's important for us to remember, if we're talking about removing bus amenity to resolve some of these issues, please do not forget that each bus we facilitate amounts to perhaps 10 to 30 individual cars on the road. So saving time for 2 or 3 cars at the expense of that is a no-brainer. In regards to the cycleways, I just wanted to reinforce the position that, like, tourist routes are no substitute for appropriately developed and safe local cycling infrastructure. Cycling, particularly for utility, to get to work, to get to amenities, cannot be sidelined onto these routes, and it's absolutely critical that we continue to develop safe routes through the rural areas. I wanted to highlight that there are many missed sections. For me, one that stands out is Appleby. I'm sorry, I'm not aware currently of the development plans for the Appleby Highway, but as someone who cycles in from Moutere to Richmond and Nelson, it's a darn hard one takes one's life. So all support to that. Thanks, Tim.
thank you. Just from myself, Councillor Turner, you had something further?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed this one, but with the low cost risk projects, Burke's Bank is, as we know, a dangerous spot, and there have been deaths there. But recently, when I was travelling along, there were bikes, one coming down Burke's Bank and one going up. and the cars coming from Richmond to Brightwater don't have the visual, or don't have visibility until they get to the top of Burke's Bank to see if there are bikes and things there. So should we have sharrows there, or, you know, it's an accident waiting to happen because people don't tend to slow for the bikes at the moment. They tend to move out towards the middle line, and maybe even a bit of medium barrier there or something. It's just a matter of time before a cyclist is knocked off their bike there. And there is a strip down the side on the left-hand side where a cycle way could go quite easily, just, you know, with a bit of work with a bulldozer or something. So I'd just like to highlight that because, yeah, there have been deaths there, and, you know, it's just a flick of time and someone could be injured.
Is that included in any regional plan? Okay.
Thank you. So just from myself, starting back at the end and working backwards, just in relation to the flooding sites, I understand that the Wakefield North site work is starting today and next week, so that's really appreciated. There's been some prompt response in that case, and just thanks to you, Emma and Andrew, if you've had any input into that, because it was actually flooding one young couple's property quite severely. So hopefully with this good weather, they'll be able to get on and get that done. But of course, that still leaves us the outstanding sites at Ramsdale Road and the Farmlands corner. Is there any plan to address them as quickly as you have the other one that I've just mentioned? Because they're quite historical.
Sorry, through the chair. Yes, look, I wasn't actually aware that they'd started on that Wakefield one. I don't know how they've got the budget for that. So that was the query I got back on the other ones, is that it's not, we haven't got the funding for those, but we really, because there's no stormwater systems there to connect into, so it's not a very simple solution. But we're really keen to work with council on, you know, putting, if there was a stormwater system there, or working on a stormwater system that we can all use. You know.
I understand the one at Wakefield annotated to me that it's just going out to open farmland, the drainage, and just changing the drainage on between the road pavement and the edge of the corridor. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. But yeah, no, it was certainly a letter drop to all those people in that area saying that that work was underway for this weekend next. Did you have something, Dwayne?
I was going to say, look, take Andrew up on his invitation to work with us. Says in the future there's a Wakefield catchment management plan program that'll be next year, I think. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's within the next year or two. And we're working through the Richmond South reimagining process, and through that there will be improvements that council will need to undertake to the Richmond South area, which include one, possibly two bridges on the state highway net, which will probably have some beneficial effect, as well as the upstream works that we're planning on. So we'll catch up with Kotahi on that. The downside of that is you can expect that that infrastructure is going to be a few years out as that area, if, you know, because it won't be put in place before that area develops.
And then I guess the other one from me is the State Highway 6 Delos Bluff, which is 5 kilometres west of Murchison, and where there's one lane, and it does appear, and the locals raised this issue at their community council meeting, they are quite concerned that that whole lane could drop out and even into the other lane and lose that access, which is obviously, as you know, a heavy trucking route through there with no real viable alternative. So I think Tasman Journeys have had a further look at it and said they could go back into the hill, but will this be a long drawn out process to get that road remediated like we've had in some other areas out there?
Well, I think the short answer is no.
Sure.
And look, there has been further movement there with this last rain event this last few weeks. So it is a concern for us that section is, I mean, it's a vulnerable section of road, and it's quite an important linkage between top of the south and west coast and the south. So it's a pretty major connection there without an alternative route. So yeah, we're working through that. I wouldn't say we're fast tracking it, but we are. The designs are just about finished. We're now going to get pricing. Obviously, it's not a great time to start earthworks in the middle of winter, but we are hoping to start the beginning of spring and have that completed by the beginning of summer. That's our intent. So yeah, we're certainly we don't want to see a drawn out process there, and we're also quite concerned about that section.
So is there an increased level of monitoring?
Well, the team were down there last week. The designs are done, so we're keeping a close eye on what's going on, and we're working to get a solution now. The team are fairly confident it's not going to go back into that lane at the moment, but obviously we need to get in there and fix that fairly quickly so that it doesn't get worse.
That's a now. I think you may or receive a communication from the Merchants and Community Council about that. So I'll leave that to you to respond, but I might just at the end of the meeting have a chat to you and Emma about that type of correspondence, if that's okay. Yeah. Thank you. So do we have anything further? Okay. So that, now, do we need to remove the receipt of Emma's report separately, Dwayne, or is there a resolution or not?
Leave it attached as a presentation, so no need.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for your input, Emma and Andrew. And we'll move to our one, what's it called?
Oh, the transport planning update.
Transport planning update. Drew, that's in your name, and councillors, it's on page 29. And I must start before 29, actually.
Page 20, you might be.
Okay, yeah, it must be a typo. So it starts on page 19. So Drew and Claire, welcome, and when you're ready, thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, we would like to present this report. We'll give you a brief update of what's in the report.
Okay, just to pull your microphone in a bit tight, closer, Drew, please, just for the benefit of those on Zoom.
Sure, how's that?
Yes.
Talk loud, Drew.
Yeah.
Thank you. Through the chair, we would like to bring this report. We'll do a bit of a recap of what's in there, and then we'll give an opportunity to ask questions. But through the chair, would you like us to, there's myself, I've got a couple of sections, and Claire here has a couple of sections that she looks after. Would you like us to pause for questions at each section, or?
Yes, please, yeah.
Okay. So through the chair, the first section that I'm going to talk to is public transport. Effectively, Tasman District Council has been working with Nelson City Council to start a new public transport services on July 2023, or 1st of July 2023. And effectively, we're creating 8 new routes. Some of them are very similar to what we currently have, but we do have those new routes, particularly in Tasman, that go all the way out to Motueka and Wakefield. Including routes 1 and 2 are being modified to take a bigger proportion of Richmond into account as well. These new bus services have, the tender documents to use these new bus services have gone out, and so we are going through that tender process at the moment. The tender closes on the 12th of July. And we would like to award the contract on the 26th of August. Council is also working on establishing the new bus stops for these services, particularly along Route 5 and Route 6, which is the Motueka and Wakefield routes. And we've already started to do that in Richmond with the new bus stops, seats, and signage that you see around Richmond already. So happy to take questions on public transport.
Are you expecting, Drew, expecting to put any infrastructure in for the Wakefield to Nelson route?
Yes, through the chair, yes, we are. We have a number of stops already picked out, and we are going to be putting infrastructure in for those, which includes at a minimum signage on the road and a sign and a schedule for each of the stops. And then we have a number of other infrastructure that we'd like to roll out. It might not be straight away before the 1st of July. It might be progressively over time as funding becomes available. So that will include seats and shelters.
Does that also apply to the Motueka to Nelson one?
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Turley.
At the Brightwater Community Association, there's been concerns expressed about public transport coming along Lord Rutherford Road, particularly when there are games on it, the Wanderers games at the rugby area there at the Brightwater Domain. A lot of cars park on both sides of the road down there, and they would be, if the public transport for Lord Rutherford Road, they could get on the bus at either end, and the bus could come around through Hollybush Road, Wanderers Avenue and Malthouse Crescent and serve more of the community with the public transport. So I don't know if you've had a look at that, but that's quite a strong opinion out there.
So through the chair, and we have contemplated some sort of route like that, but this was back when we were doing the regional public transport plan, and we did identify the routes at that stage, and we went out for consultation on these routes, and then we've subsequently talked to the community about just confirming those. One of the problems we have of taking that alignment is there is a number of tricky corners for bigger buses to be able to go around, and putting buses through largely residential areas or along largely residential roads is something that we are trying to avoid. We are aware that the Wakefield community bus does take that route, and so that's why it has been contemplated, because it is a route that is known by the community, but we have indeed ruled it out. It isn't a good route for a larger bus to be able to take around through there.
Is it going to be a 5-day or 6-day a week service?
Through the chair, the new services starting 1st of July is a 5-day a week service, with the intention of improving, adding more days on in subsequent years.
And so initially the Lord Rutherford Road issue won't be so much because most of the sport's on a Saturday.
That is correct, yes.
Yeah.
That was one of the reasons too, the sport being on a Saturday. They thought that people or families heading to Lord Rutherford Park could get off in Malthouse Crescent instead of all the families bringing their cars to the games and things. So it was about reducing traffic.
Through the chair, so just to clarify, when Drew said 1 July, he meant 1 July 2023. So there isn't a service imminent or anything like that, just in case that was misunderstood. The other thing, Drew, is that we're now locked in terms of our tender process. Is that right? On the basis of all the plans, we are now going out for tender, and we've got basically a timeline we have to keep to if those services are going to start on 1 July 2023.
That is correct. Yes, we do have we've got to give the contractor or the potential new contractor or the winning tenderer an opportunity to be able to be ready for the contract to start in 1 July 2023, which includes purchasing buses if appropriate. And so we are really up against the timeline now to give the winning tenderer the appropriate time to be able to do that. So making changes now is not advisable.
Thank you. Doesn't appear to be any. Oh, Councillor Butler, do you have something?
Yeah, just in relation to the public transport plan for Takaka, it has sort of worked out to be a perfect storm really with COVID and the existing commercial service stopping for that reason. But I'm just wondering if it's possible to have a conversation with the community about, the plan for public transport service because a community bus with volunteer drivers is not really feasible for Tākaka because it means that a driver has to be away all day. And we have a lot of call on Tākaka on people to do voluntary things, you know, because we're isolated and we can't draw people in from other areas. So I'm just wondering if there's going to be scope to work something out with a commercial operator whereby they can function as both a commercial bus service for tourists, which we are really keen to have. Golden Bay Promotions are very keen to have more tourists coming by bus to reduce the environmental footprint of everybody having to get a car to come over the hill. At the same time, we've also got a lot of local residents who at the moment actually have no way of any transport, paid transport over to Nelson because that bus service has stopped. And I know there's an issue with emails about maybe some subsidy of that service, but where it sits at the moment, I'm not sure. But it just could we have another look at it? So Golden Bay Promotions are keen that there will be the combined service and not have two separate services because it's just not really viable.
So through the chair, we have, I say relatively recently, but 2021, we did update the regional public transport plan. This committee went through that process. And so the next opportunity to do that again would be 2024 as a 3-year review. Also, the funding comes through the regional land transport plan for that, and that's the way we apply to Waka Kotahi for that funding. So that 2024 would be the opportune time to relook at a dedicated commercial service operating all the way over to Golden Bay. At this point in time, I think certainly for this contract, it's not an option to be able to be putting into this contract, but it's something that we can work towards, including in 2024 as a new service from there on.
Thank you. I think that brings us to the end of the questions on that section. Drew, so if you'd like to carry on.
So through the chair, the next section is walking and cycling, and given that Claire has been the lead on that, I'll leave it for her to summarise.
Hi, everybody. Through the chair, I'll just talk to you about a quick summary of where we're at with walking and cycling at the moment. So as you all probably aware, Council approved the walking and cycling strategy on the 26th of May. So that's out now, available to the public for people to have a look at, hard copies at local libraries and service centres around the district. Following up on that is the Streets for People process. So Emma mentioned the Streets for People program a little bit. So from our perspective here, we've applied for funding when we've been approved for the initial pre-implementation funding for this set of Streets for People, for the Streets for People program this year. And we're currently working on a proposal, staff are working on a proposal to get the next set of funding. And if we are successful in that, that's a 90% financial assistance rate that we'd be receiving. So that would be allowing us to really accelerate the program in the walking and cycling strategy. So bringing a lot of that forward, being able to accomplish those actions like separated cycleways a lot sooner. So we will be presenting, staff here will be presenting our proposal to Waka Kotahi panel. Emma Spit will be there as well on the 18th of July. So that's coming up fairly soon. And then on the 23rd of June, so before that, at the operations committee meeting, there'll be a report about the Streets for People program that I believe Jamie is presenting. And you'll hear more about it at that point. We've also applied for some funding from the Tourism Infrastructure Fund which is a 50% funding assistance rate, and that would be to develop some shared path cycle walkways in Riawaka Kaiteriteri Road, and also around Pohara Takaka cycleway through to Pohara Valley Road. So we haven't heard back about that yet, though, but that's in the works. That's just a really quick overview, but if you have any questions about where we're at with the Streets for People program in particular, let me know.
The Streets for People, we're going to pretty much cover off on Thursday, aren't we, and form a subcommittee and go from there. So that should be useful.
Through the chair, that's right. We're looking at forming a governance committee to stay really closely in touch with staff about the process and the community for the whole Streets for People program, so that we've got that really strong governance link, that you know what's going on, and are able to really have that informed communication with the community as well.
Thank you. Emma?
One of the things in that assessment process that we go through, and it's something that we learned very much from the initial projects, is we look at the level of governance engagement as well as council leadership engagement in terms of are there advocates and champions for the program, and people who are really prepared to get alongside and work with the team and the community, because these projects sometimes you get a mixed reception. We've found through the early projects is that the better connected people are, and the better engaged councillors and council officers are, the more chance of success there is. So that is one of the things that we do assess in the process.
Thank you. Jane, good morning.
Good morning. Hello, just a quick question for Claire. Thanks for your presentation. Just in terms of the walking and cycling strategy itself, now that it's been accepted, I was just wondering what major changes, if any, occurred between the draft strategy and the final strategy. Thank you.
Claire.
So through the chair, there were a range of, you will be receiving a letter soon, by the way, detailing these changes. But a lot of the changes were around strengthening the wording of what we were proposing. So for example, and this will be of particular interest to you, Jane, changing some of the wording around the principles and policies to sort of just increase the strength of the wording and making it a little bit more, providing a bit more surety about that happening going forward. So changing some mays to will, for example, in terms of wording. Additionally, there was a fourth principle added that talked about making sure that routes were direct and connected. That was another change. In terms of the maps, there weren't many changes made to the maps. One of the changes involved some tweaks to the Murchison map and moving the proposals there to be away from the state highway, and replacing the cycleways with shared paths on the already quite wide footpath there. And that's, we heard really clearly from the community that that's what they wanted there. Some of the other changes were made in response to a lot of Golden Bay submitters who were very concerned about the safety of rural routes getting into Takaka, over and above the safety of cycling in Takaka itself. So while the separated cycleways remain on the map in Takaka, we did change the strategy a bit to say that we would be focusing on working with Waka Kotahi first to look at improving the safety around some of those pinch points around Golden Bay on routes in towards Takaka. And we've already talked about that a little bit earlier in Emma's presentation, some of those places. Were there any other, just off the top of your head, Drew, changes to the strategy that we should bring up? The speed management aspect of it, the 30 km/h residential areas and town centers remained. That stayed constant, as did the key grid of separated cycleways, and that also stayed the same. So the
Some tweaking to the wording and some of that.
there were some tweaks to the wording. I mean, by and large, the strategy stayed quite similar to how it was in the draft form. And this is because we got a really high support rating from the community, with 80% of people who responded being approving of the core, the foundation of the strategy with the speed management, the lowering of speeds, and also the separated cycleways. So it stayed relatively the same, but just had a few tweaks. But I'm happy to follow up more with you about that, Jane, as well, if you'd like.
Thank you. Nothing further. So of that, we can move on to speed management now. Thank you, Claire.
Sure. So through the chair, I'll be covering the speed management aspect as well. So as Emma mentioned, the new speed setting rule came into effect in May this year, and that means that bylaws, the speed limit bylaw will no longer be required to set speed limits. So it's really changed the whole national structure of how speeds are set and how local councils apply to change speed limits in their own regions and districts. So all councils are required to have a speed management plan by July 2024. But because of the high demand and the knowledge we have about the importance of speed on safety and the concerns of the community and concerns of elected members, we will be working on putting together an interim speed management plan starting, it's already in process, really. So we want to get that done as soon as possible, really, because we know there's a lot of places around in the district where the speeds are just too high and it's not safe. And we've heard from you that we need to change that. So we've pretty much started from scratch in creating a new interim speed management plan. We are reviewing the entire network apart from state highways, because obviously that will have its own separate speed management plan. And we're making sure that as we put that together, we're really aligning with other existing strategies and guidelines. So making sure what we're putting into the interim speed management plan is aligning with the walking and cycling strategy, for example, and the One Network framework, which is the new sort of speed setting guideline classification system for our roads. So we're looking at all those different factors and putting that into the interim speed management plan and creating sort of a matrix of how we are deciding what speeds we'll be proposing for where. So coming up next week, I believe on the 29th of June, if that is next week already, I'll be presenting a workshop to councillors about how we're going about creating the interim speed management plan, what the process is, the RTC's involvement in that process, and the potential for the RTC to actually have a larger role and be the main conduit, really, between council and Waka Kotahi during the process to sort of shortcut the process there. But you'll hear more about that at the workshop on the 29th. In the meantime, staff we've been going around doing lots of site visits around the district, having a on the ground look at different roads, different locations, driving at the posted speed limit, and then driving at what feels safe, and actually looking at it from a really intuitive perspective as well, in terms of what is a safe and appropriate speed for that particular location. And so again, on the 29th, we'll hear more about that and the RTC's involvement in that process.
Thank you. Just before we go to questions, I wondered if Mike, you might just be able to cover it off from the state highway perspective.
Hi.
Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. I've been listening with interest. Yes. So, yes, can I cover it off from the state highway perspective? So Wakatahi are, as you're well aware, looking at state highways, and they are, as every other RCA and regional council, are contemplating the interim speed management plans and the 24-27 speed management plans. the main event, I suppose, is the 24-27 speed measurement plans, because those are the plans that require a format that talks about a 10-year vision and 3-year implementation and consideration of speed and infrastructure and safety cameras, whereas the interim plans are much closer to, or can be much closer to, what you're doing at the moment. The expectation from Wakatahi is that sometime in August, starting in August and going through till kind of March or April, there'll be a series of conversations between the State Highway team and each of the RCAs around the roads that are considered risky roads, and gaining agreement between Wakatahi and ideally police and the RCA. And to an extent, Ministry of Ed for schools around, where are the risky areas, and then working through what the interventions are to put in place on those, and then think through the willingness and acceptance to put in place the safe and appropriate speed versus the amount of noise and pushback that might come from trying to put in a speed that was not well received. So in short, that's kind of the process. Expectation is, as I say, kind of cooperative, collaborative view about what we're doing and how we're doing for both the interim plans and the 24-27, and the purpose of that is both to share information, but also so that if Wakatahi are proposing to change the speed on a road, then the local roads can plan around those speed limit changes. I'm sure you're all well aware of the rat running issue. So if we wanted to ensure that where there's a lower speed on a state highway, there was also lower speeds on the surrounding local roads, then cooperation and collaboration is clearly the only real way to achieve that. Any questions?
Yep. Well, we'll see if there's any questions for either of you. Yakul, you can go first if you like.
Kia ora, Drew and Claire, and kia ora, Mike. My interest was just in regards to the speed management plan. To reiterate a point from earlier in the meeting, but directly to yourselves, in terms of emissions, could you comment? And Mike, I hope Wakatahi is also considering this in terms of their road to zero. To what extent are you considering the emissions benefits of reduced speed levels throughout the region, Claire and Drew?
We are. The rule doesn't talk about emissions, but as you know, there's a whole separate set of legislation that very much does talk about emissions. The thing that we know is that, and I think was mentioned earlier in this meeting, that a reduction from 100 to 80 has a noticeable increase in CO2 emissions. That's not the purpose of the speed rule. The speed rule is kind of around safety and saving lives. However, reducing CO2 emissions saves lives in a different kind of way, I guess. So are the two related? Absolutely. Is there an intention in our messaging to combine those two up? We're working through how we could do that. So does that answer your question? I'm not entirely sure.
Thank you.
Thanks for your commentary, Mike. Also to Drew and Claire, regards locally.
Claire.
Kia ora, thanks, Yakul, for your question. Well, as Mike said, and as Emma said, the speed management plan itself is focused largely on safety and the importance of speed for safety. However, I can say that the speed management plan aspect in our walking and cycling strategy, there's a lot of overlaps between the implications of speed and holistic improvement for the environment. The walking and cycling strategy is focused on safety, but also on livability and emissions reductions. And as I'm sure you've seen in the strategies, speed management is a big aspect of that. So it's only in our urban areas, not in the rural areas, obviously. But we are definitely looking at it with that holistic framework. And as we continue with the process of the speed management plan, we'll definitely be keeping that in mind.
Thank you. Nothing further. Any other questions here in the chamber? Clear.
I just wanted to add, I remember Councillor Turley, you asked a question about schools before when we were talking about speed management. And for the interim speed management plan that we're working on now, which we'll present in more detail on the 29th, we are looking at a speed of 30 kilometers an hour around all schools in the urban area. From Tasman District Council's interim speed management plan perspective, we know that 30 is a safer speed than 40. 40 is better than 50, but 30 is better than 40, particularly when you're talking about really vulnerable road users. The survival chances at 30 are much better than being hit even at 40. So that's what we'll be looking at. The rule doesn't require places that have already got a 40 kilometer an hour change, variable speed sign or permanent speed zone around schools, don't require those to change, but we will be looking at changing those as well down to 30 because we know it is safer. And as you mentioned, it is really important for drivers to have that consistency as well, that all schools are the same, not changing, because you're quite right, people won't know, and it'll be easy for people to forget. So that's what we'll be looking at in the urban environment. Rurally, we're looking at a maximum of 60 kilometer an hour around schools, but possibly actually lower. So we've looked at the different speed, the different school zones, and in some places you may actually see and you can see the map, you'll be able to see the maps before the workshop, but you'll be able to see a 60 kilometer an hour speed zone on one road facing the school that's fronting the school, and 30 on another road on another side of the school, because one is the place where a lot of kids are crossing and being dropped off, whereas the other road is not so much. So we're trying to look at each place specifically and seeing what's most appropriate for each location. But in terms of urban, it'll be 30. That's what we'll be proposing, is 30 across the board.
Thank you. Yakul, do you have a further question?
Yeah, just an observation and support, I think a relevant one, in support of what Claire's just been saying. Having spoken in the last week to colleagues in the Toi Toi area, Nelson, Upper Vanguard Street, and just observations there about the confusion and ambiguity that 40 kilometre zones have created around schools, and a call from them towards standardised 30k. 40 could be 50, could be 30. One has a very difficult time judging just where drivers have picked to drive in that band. 30 is a pretty clear and well-established restraint. So absolutely support those changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Claire. I guess you'll be doing stock control bylaw as well.
That's right. On to stock control. So we've been working on creating a new stock control bylaw. The previous stock control bylaw, which was created in 2005, expired in 2017. So that has recently been approved to go out for public consultation. So that's out now. The public consultation period starts on the 1st of June and goes to 1st of July and goes to the 1st of August. So a month-long process there. It's currently being advertised. People are being notified of the consultation period coming up. In developing the draft stock control bylaw, we worked with federated farmers to ensure that what was in the bylaw was practical and realistic for farmers. And we also worked, we had legal review, both internal and external, to make sure that how it was worded is enforceable. So we wanted it to be practical and enforceable, and not make things excessively onerous for farmers, but still but still be up to date with best practice road safety standards and freshwater management standards. So the key changes really from the 2005 stock bylaw to the 2022 stock bylaw is changing the stopping distances required. So changing the distance between the signs alerting drivers that there's a crossing coming up and the crossing itself, because we know that particularly with heavy vehicles, it takes longer to stop and people need that time to see the sign, to register what's going on, and then slow down. We also just improved the clarity of the wording, improved the legal aspect of the bylaw itself to make it a better document, and also included more details about aligning with the National Policy Statement on Freshwater and sort of the overarching principle of Te Mana o Te Wai, which wasn't really delved into in the 2005 stock crossing bylaw. So those have been the main changes. So that was sent out on the 16th of June, approved for public consultation then. And the hearings and deliberations on that following the consultation period will be significantly later in the year after elections. So it will actually be the new council, and the new hearings panel will be made up of who's ever on the council in after the elections.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions related to that? I think you covered it at regulatory the other day, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. There was some commentary in the media I see last night or this morning. I think we can move on to transport emissions, Drew. Oh, Emma, sorry.
Just a comment really from me. I've dealt with this in some other council regions, and it becomes more important when things don't go well.
Yeah.
So if you do want to follow up after the meeting, I'm happy to give you some pointers on that.
Thank you. Drew.
Thank you, through the chair. Finally, the last thing that we want to just draw your attention to is transport emissions reduction. So the Ministry for the Environment released the emissions reduction plan in 16th of May of this year. Emma Spate has already alluded to that and talked about it. In addition to that, we have been future development strategy. And one element of that is how we take into account the future emissions from different development settlements. So we undertook a body of work to try and get an idea of what that would be. So we started off by creating a model that looked at vehicle kilometres travelled, or VKT, from the different settlement patterns, and that is in the report under section 7.5. And really it kind of shows that anything more regional around the Waimea, Moutere, Motueka, Nelson area, anything more regional or more rural is going to have a greater transport emissions. The only difference to that was really Motueka. Motueka, because it is a larger centre in itself, it has a high school, it has a main an employment hub, actually did really well in terms of the vehicle kilometres travelled that settlement pattern creates. We took this information from these vehicle kilometres travelled and we took into account the public transport plan that we've created with Nelson City Council. We've also taken into account the approved walking and cycling strategy. We also threw into the mix the advice from Ministry of Transport about what emissions and different patterns of vehicle use and everything will be in the future. And we created and we looked at what the carbon emissions would be for transport around the region. And that is up to section 7.6. And it's effectively the orange line that you see in the report. That is what we're predicting from the settlement patterns from the future development strategy. In order to kind of get an idea of if that was good or bad, we created a couple of different scenarios to kind of give it some envelope. The blue line that you see is an intensification scenario. So that's looking at just putting everyone within the Nelson Tasman area out to 2050. So in other words, taking the future development strategy numbers of people that are going to, that a population will grow by, and actually just concentrating them in this area. We also did a different scenario, which was just a rural development or just further rural development, and that's the grey line. And that is effectively just creating more rural residential type developments in the wider area around the district. Sorry, not around the district, around the commutable distance to Nelson Richmond. You can see there that the future development street scenario, the updated one that is after the consultation, performs okay. It is more aligned with the intensification than it is with the rural development. And then we also compared it to advice that we're hearing in order to keep climate emissions, temperatures from from greenhouse gas emissions less than 1.5 degrees, and that's the yellow line. And you can see there that despite how closely we are getting to the intensification, we are still a long way from achieving those goals of 50% reduction by 2030 and 100% reduction by 2050. But it's a bit of work that we've been working with our colleagues that are doing the future development strategy, and it's worth noting from a transport perspective. Happy to take questions on that too.
You did cover that off, did you, at the future development strategy workshop for all councillors?
Through the chair, yes. I've covered it off a couple of times. One is the hearings panel and also the last workshop that we had.
Are you happy if anyone's got any questions on that? Which it appears not. So I think that just about brings us to the end of your items. We do have a resolution, well, we did have.
Receive the report.
Just to receive the report. Unless there's anything further, would someone like to move that? That we receive. Move Councillor Butler, seconded Councillor Turley. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. So I think that brings us to all the end of the agenda items, Drain, other than the closing karakia. Without you to do, please.
No worries. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa ponamu te moana, aroha atu, aroha mai, tēnā tātou, tēnā tātou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Thank you. Well done. Thank you all for your attendance and enthusiastic input, and we'll see some of you again on Thursday or tomorrow for a workshop. Thank you all. Thank you, Yakko and Jane and Mike. Thanks for your attendance and input.
Thank you for having us. Got it.
Kia ora.
Thank you.
Got a few follow-ups here. I'm sorry, I meant to show this through. Got a few follow-ups with the team. Just make notes as we're going along. Regarding the Agent of Change Award, I've notified Jamie before he was in to say we probably need to touch base with comms just to do something about that. Road closures and the cost efficiency, you know, like is it more costly and less disruptive to have it at night?
Right.
So I've asked, I just said to direction, Jamie, you should probably anticipate questions on this at the Ops Committee.
Yeah.